Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to Tony the Technician channel, and today we're going to be going into the 3rd gen Camaro again. Last time you guys may have watched the install of the caster camber plates from Founders Performance. They didn't send me any instructions, so we got them installed, and I originally told you guys we were going to break this down into individual videos of the caster camber plates, the A-arms, and the coilovers. Well, that's not going to happen. It's too much work to install one and then try and make a video of the next one, and it's just too much all in the same area. I have to remove it all to do each one anyways, so we're just at the caster camber plate is its own special video, and then this time we're just gonna remove the A-arms and the old shocks and springs, and we're gonna install the new tubular A-arms and coilovers. That's what this video is for. And if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, or anything like that, please drop a comment down below. Other than that, if you guys enjoy, please make sure to hit that thumbs up, and if you haven't, consider subscribing. So I still have my original shock in here that I have just the nut started up here just to hold it so it doesn't have to be held by the jack. So first up, I'm going to remove the sway bar and the sway bar end link. And then once I do that, I can kind of get that out of the way. I am going to try and get this spring compressor in. In another video I watched, the guy never showed how to install this. I know it goes in, but it is not as easy to use this guy as originally thought. At least not in this application. I've used this style before on other vehicles, but this close of enclosure, it's kind of a pain. But I'm gonna figure it out, and we'll go ahead and get that clamped onto the spring, and then we'll start to remove everything necessary in order to get these A-arms and these old shocks and springs out. We need to remove the steering knuckle from the A-arm. So either way, I need to support my A-arm with my jack, so I'm going to place my jack up underneath here. I have the spring compressor mounted, the brake lines released, the sway bars removed, or the sway bar end link removed, so there's nothing connected. We just need to support the A-arm while we separate the shock and steering knuckle from the A-arm and everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this cotter pin. I'm gonna use my pickle fork to separate it here, and this will be held up by the shock assembly here, and then I will slowly release the A-arm down in order to get that spring out. Once we get the spring out, then I can get the new A-arm in, and then after we get the steering knuckle reconnected to the new A-arm, then I'll probably go in and replace the old shock with the new coilovers. Now we're going to simply and dangerously lower this A-arm. Hopefully it holds onto the spring. I'm so mad I did not get that on camera. So these are aftermarket springs. I knew it was they weren't stock when I bought the car a while back. But so basically what had happened, I'm sorry I did not catch it. So I was lowering the A-arm, and I realized the tension was coming off of this, but the spring was still extremely stiff. Well, what had happened was when I installed this compressor, the center rod had actually gone up through the top portion. Let me see if I can show you guys. Up here through that, and it threaded itself into that. So even though the spring was compressed, it wouldn't come out, and I had the A-arm dropped all the way down. It wouldn't come out because the top like inch or two of this was threaded into the actual K-member. So I had to sketchily remove my A-arm completely, and this spring was just bolted in here with this. And so I slowly removed the spring compressor and unthreaded it from the K-member, and luckily as it did that, it was also decompressing the spring, so when it finally did let go, it was decompressed. But good lord, that was probably one of the sketchiest things I've done. So this isn't really necessarily like my other videos where I was doing how-tos, because I have so much to do here. This is just kind of a follow along video for you guys that are interested in the Camaro. If you guys have any questions, I don't suggest doing it the way I did it, but if you guys have any questions, I will do my best to help you guys out with any information that I have or any knowledge that I have. But now this is all just free floating. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to reinstall my new tubular A-arm, connect the steering knuckle, and then once we get that all set, then I can go ahead and remove the old shock, which will leave the A-arm floating freely. I'll lower it, put the new coilover in, and bolt it back to the steering knuckle, and we'll be good to go on one side. So here we are looking at the A-arms I'll be installing. These are the Spohn RRX tubular A-arms. You can get these either with the coil spring mount or specifically for the coilovers. So the coil spring mounted ones will have a cup in the center if you were just going to reinstall new shocks and springs. So mine, we're installing Viking Coilovers. So at this point you could either unmount your shock, as long as you have somewhere to set your steering knuckle, spindle, and brake caliper and everything, or hang them up. But right now my shock is holding mine in place, so you could either replace that as long as you have somewhere to kind of hang this stuff, but I'm just going to leave that. And I've already cleaned up on the K-member where we will be mounting the A-arms. That's all cleaned up and ready to go. So with these, they come with a sway bar end link mounted to them. I have a review on these specifically, so if you guys would like to know more details about these, I have a video specifically on that. So the internal portions here on the bushings do come pre-lubricated, but you do need to still grease the outside portions of the bushings, and you need to use a specific type on poly bushings. So I have small amounts that are specific for these poly bushings that I'll be lubricating up, and then we'll go ahead and install this into the K-member using the hardware kit as well. And you don't want to fully torque these or tighten them down, you just want to install it and then snug them up. You want to torque them once you have the vehicle completely loaded on the suspension, so that will be the last thing we do. So we're just going to go ahead and get this installed, and then probably we'll move on to installing the ball joint back into the spindle. So keep in mind the front bolt is going to be, the 4 bolts are going to be different lengths. The front bolts are longer bolts, the rear ones are shorter bolts. I had to swap out my back one because I had a front bolt in there, so we got that done. And then I tightened up the brake line mount again, and then now what I've done was removed the nut and top portion of the sway bar end link built into the A-arm, and I'm going to feed it up through the sway bar as well as the ball joint through the steering knuckle. So like I said, with the A-arm to K-member bolts, you're just snugging them up, you're not torquing them. And then same thing with the sway bar and link, you're just going to put everything together and you'll snug this down, but you won't fully tighten this until you have it loaded, sitting on the ground. And then you will just tighten this just to the point to where you see these starting to deform. As soon as you start to see it deform, that is when you stop tightening your sway bar and link. And then this is already set at a preset height, so we're good there. Now I'm just going to go ahead and tighten down the castle nut and get my cotter pin in, and then that'll be it as far as the A-arm, and we'll move on to the coilover finally. So we have the entire A-arm installed. The only thing that's left to do is torque the sway bar and K-member bolts. So I got the ball joint torque, 83 foot-pounds on ball joints. Lower control arm pivot nuts, which are the K-member, are 67 foot-pounds. So that will be done after we get the car loaded back down on the ground. Sway bar end links state 15 foot-pounds, but that is from Haynes, and I'm gonna go with the Spohn directions and just tighten down that nut until it slightly starts to deform, and then I'll stop. And once again, that's all done after we are done. So now that that is completely installed, we're going to start with the shock. So all I had to do is support the A-arm now, and then we will go to remove these two primary nuts that hold the shock to the spindle. So what I've done, what I found fits best, at least for mine, because mine were painted, so the thing that I found fits best was a 24 millimeter, and that goes for both sides. And this Capri angled wrench definitely came in handy. I held that on the back side of the shock, and that's the bolt head side, and then the nuts on this side. And I was actually able to break them loose with this, so no issues there. And this one broke loose as well, so we'll go ahead and get that one out. And then the shock will just kind of be free floating, only held in by the fastener up top, and we'll go ahead and swap it out. So there's the old one out. Now we'll go ahead and get the new one installed. I'm going to start off. Spoke with a buddy that runs the same coilovers, and he did have to use a sleeve. He's pretty sure he used the short one. There are two different lengths. So I'm going to go ahead and start out with this one and see if that's the right fitment for it. So using new hardware as well. So ran into a small issue. No major modification necessary. It's just when I go to put in the coilover, I get it put into the caster camber plate, and when I do, only one of the holes lines up for the knuckle, and the bottom one is kind of off center. Even trying to tilt the steering knuckle different directions, I can't quite get it to line up. So as you can see down here, all I've done was taken my sander and kind of started grinding away on this. A file was going to take too long, and a big grinder doesn't really fit in here all that well, and I don't want to turn this too far out. And with the big grinder, I didn't want to use a big grinder because the space in here is limited, and I don't want to throw material everywhere, so I'm using a small sander and kind of keeping the ball joint and all the bushings wrapped up to protect them. Bottom of the coilover just barely touches that, so I need to take about an 1/8 inch off. So we got it off now, and now everything should line up. So we'll go ahead and get it installed. So we got it installed. I just simply slid it up through the bottom of the caster camber plate, started the nut on the top side just to hold it in place, while I then went and started the 2 fasteners at the base of the coilover, and then I went ahead and torqued everything down. And I'll have to do the exact same thing on the other side with trimming of the spindle or the steering knuckle, and then I need to make sure that I set this at the same height on the other side. Now this isn't adjusted or anything, I just want to make sure that they're the same, so when I set it down on the ground I can make the adjustments and the vehicle is the same from left to right. And then I will try and post up a picture of some of the torque specs that I found. Some of these components stated some torque specs, some of them did not. Where I did not have torque specs with the components that I received, I used stock specs. And keep in mind that this is just from one manual for a certain year of 3rd gen Camaro or Firebird, and don't just go off of these. Make sure you double check any information that you can find as far as torque specs, so you guys know that you're using the correct torque specs on these components. But besides that, everything is torqued down and ready to go except for the 2 A-arm to K-member bolts and the sway bar end link nut. Once I get the vehicle set down on the ground, I will torque the A-arm bolts because that's what it states to do, and then I will double check the sway bar end link to make sure that it is set properly. Other than that, it's all good to go. That's the install of the front suspension. So now we have upgraded brakes, rotors, coilovers, front sway bar, wonder bar, A-arms, and the only thing I haven't installed so far is the steering linkage, the outer tie rod to the steering knuckle here, and that's because I have a separate video on the install of that and all the new components that I ran there. So if you guys are replacing any of your steering components, center link, pitman arm, idler arm, inner and outer tie rods, adjustment sleeves, anything like that, I will have a video alone on that. So I really hope you guys found this helpful and enjoyable. If I forgot to mention anything, please feel free to drop a comment down below. Other than that, please let me know your guys' thoughts on this install and your thoughts on how it's going. No major modification in order to get this installed. The minor modification to the steering knuckle, the only major modification was to my wallet. After dropping about $3 on suspension for this thing. So other than that, you know, I'm happy with it. So please, once again, let me know your guys' thoughts, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys did, please make sure to hit that thumbs up, leave a comment down below with your guys' thoughts, and as always, subscribe if you're not a subscriber. See you guys next time.